Ya lo hace. Pierna derecha, directo al arco. ¡Golazo! ¡Golazo!
The world of football with a soccer perspective. This is Soccer Today with Duane, Rollins and Kevin Laramee. Live on the Sports Podcasting Network.
Good day, good night, and welcome to Soccer Today for Thursday, October 11th, 2018. Kevin Laramee, Duane Rollins on the line, joining us today to talk about the big week in the Quakes history with the signing of Matias Almeida as their new head coach manager, Joel Soria, editor-in-chief of Quakes Epicenter. Good morning, Joel.
Good morning. How are you?
We're well, Joel, and I guess the obvious question off the start is to just ask about this this signing of the new manager. What does it mean for the San Jose Earthquakes, which, you know, fairly or unfairly has kind of become a non-factor in MLS over the past few years?
Oh man, I mean, 4 days later, it's still so surreal. You know, it's really hard to imagine, to put into words really what this means to the franchise. This is astronomical, obviously, not only to the black and blue, but to the league itself. You have a head coach here who, you know, maybe only Atlanta United and Columbus and Sporting Kansas City. I mean, aside from those three teams, probably anyone else would take him with open arms. You know, this is obviously a move that is a big statement, also of you know, the ambition that and the new direction that Jesse Fiorinelli is going to take with this team. So this honestly, as many people know, this is a huge signing for the Quakes. Obviously lacking in the head coaching department for years now. I mean, no disrespects, you know, to the former managers, but this means a lot to the team and to the community, especially.
I mean, look, this season's been particularly bad, but the Quakes have not been notable in a while. So you mentioned that word ambition. As someone who watches the Quakes, who cares about the Quakes a great deal, do you feel that this is a symbol of them now having that ambition to become a team that no longer is forgettable?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, along the process of hiring a new manager, I was being told that, you know, well, the team wanted to make a big splash on hiring this manager. They wanted a manager with relevancy. They wanted a manager that was going to have a pull with, you know, the surrounding, the big Latino community around San Jose. They obviously did that, but on top of that, I was also told that, you know, the ownership group, John Fisher and co., they're ready. They're ready to double down financially on this team next season, and obviously you're going to need that with a coach like Matias Almeida, because he's going to ask for players. He's going to ask for big transfers. So that, on top of obviously bringing in Pelado, is also very significant and very ambitious.
You mentioned that the former managers. I want to talk just a little bit about Miguels before we move on to talk about Almeida. From the outside, it did look like a tire fire this year. I'll forever remember that famous night, if not infamous night in Montreal, where he subbed out a sub, and the big argument on the sideline with his players that left an imprint. And I remember doing a special show for San Jose listeners that you can go back on the archive and find it, where it took about 45 minutes after the game to actually talk to Miguels. And at that point, he mentioned injuries, which weren't mentioned any time before during the game. And that double sub just showed maybe a glimpse of the lack of direction, lack of consistency, and the lack of identity that this team had and the more reactionary method that he was using. Do you think the Michael Starry era will leave an imprint, will leave maybe a sour taste in the fans' mouth after this very difficult season?
Absolutely. Miguel Starry, the name will forever remain ingrained in the history of the San Jose Earthquakes, at least with the fans who lived through those dark times. Miguel Starry, obviously, was a pleasure to work alongside with. He was a very accessible coach and everything, but the league was too big for him. It was too much. It was a very hard transition. There was somewhat of a language barrier, I guess. He struggled at times to really express himself clearly. He was in Sweden. He was known for being a good player coach. That failed tremendously in San Jose. He wasn't able to get a grip of his locker room, or if he had it early on, he lost it really quickly. And that was kind of the reason for all the turmoil. But yeah, I mean, that name's going to stick around for a long time. Those are really, really obviously sour times in the history of the Quakes, and I guess it's now time to move on, and what a name to choose to succeed Miguel Starry.
One thing that always surprised me with the Quakes, and that's been lasting for about 3 years, I've watched the Quakes closely since 2013 for personal reasons, and over the last 3 years, I've always been surprised by the lack of ambition, like you mentioned earlier, but the lack of desire to spend money, the lack of embracing the market, the lack of trying to make the Bay Area their own and truly tap into the potential of one of the most populated area in the United States, the lack of progression in the sponsor market where you go to the Silicon Valley, the lack of relationship with that part of the area. With the signing of Matias Almeida as the manager and the potential of more money spending on players and on infrastructures, do you think it's going to be enough to tap that potential market for fans, for sponsors, for relevancy that we see has been missing with the Quakes? It's one of the most important area in the United States, the San Jose, Bay Area, San Francisco area. Is it time now to finally tap that potential?
I think so. There's a couple of things going on as well within the club. That makes this hiring, picture perfect-esque, I guess I would say. Their sponsorship deals with Sutter Health and I believe Avaya are going to be terminating soon. I know for sure in 2019 they'll have a new kit sponsor. So, and then they'll also obviously have a new home uniform. That's going to have obviously a major impact on the team's financial flexibility, right? They're I'm sure going to be bringing in Tom Fox is going, he's the president, very well connected person in the business sports industry. They're going to bring in, I'm sure, a big name, to stamp on their kit. Also here you sign Matias Almeida, but you got to think about the signing, right? You got to think of the timing of the signing as well. This is at the peak of Almeida's coaching career. You really couldn't get him at a better time. He left such a huge imprint with Chivas. Just last night, Chivas played at Via Stadium, against Pumas. But what a coincidence, right? On Saturday, the Quakes play against Cruz Azul, international friendly against the Liga MX club. This was a very obviously well thought of move. The timing is right. The Mexican fan base obviously is always alert in San Jose towards professional soccer. They I guess, and also they don't really have much competition. I mean, there's no other MLS team. So the ownership had time to plan their coup. They obviously doubled down at this time, and I don't think there wasn't a better scenario, a more fitting scenario. So very ambitious and very well thought of and perfectly executed.
Joel, I'm curious. Let's continue on this wavelength right here in terms of the market itself. From an outside perspective, and I like Kevin, have watched San Jose for a long time. I was a D-Row fan, so I watched San Jose way back when Duane Rosario was winning titles for them. So obviously I want this market to succeed, but I don't think it's ever met its full potential, and I'm curious as to why. Because from an outside perspective, it looks like the perfect place to have an MLS team. It's a youthful city. It's a progressive city. It's a city that sort of seems inclined to support a sport like soccer. It's a city that supports quote unquote niche sports like the Sharks are supported well. So from your perspective, what is it that's holding the Earthquakes back? I almost called them Sharks. The Earthquakes back, and how can we make that different?
Well, I feel like the team itself. For the longest time was just trying to attract a certain demographic, which obviously, just by going to a game and looking at the stands, you can tell which type of, I'm not going to say which type of demographic, but, if you're with the team and if you at the stadium, you know who they try to target, right? I guess that's probably not going to be the case anymore. This is the perfect market. This is an ideal MLS market. This is a hotbed for young talent. So you're producing. I mean, you have so much young talent in this area, in the Bay Area and in the Greater Bay Area, in Northern California. You're the San Jose Earthquakes. This is all yours. If you have the resources, you can tap into so many different surrounding areas for talent, for fans. I know people that live 2 hours away. They're willing to commute to watch the Quakes if they're playing good. And that says a lot. That obviously says a lot about this team. About what they're capable and what they're capable of doing. And, they have, on top of that, they have progressive thinking. They have a very diverse, and it's not only, Mexicans that live around the area, as you guys probably know, there's just a lot of ethnic groups that are really inclined to watch soccer. Like you said, the Sharks at SAP Center constantly filling that thing up. I remember when the SaberCats were around for the AFL, they were a very successful team as well. The San Jose Giants, they also attract people. This is a sporting town, and above all, this obviously it's the Sharks, but this can also be an earthquake city for sure. Absolutely, the right things needed to be done. The right boxes needed to be ticked, and Jesse, ticked probably the biggest one.
All right, when you win the wooden spoon, you haven't officially won it, quote unquote, won it yet, but it seems pretty likely that San Jose is going to be last place overall in MLS this year. When that happens, there's a lot of changes that need to happen on the field. So could you just let us know where you think the biggest needs are for the Earthquakes in this offseason upcoming?
Yeah, I think the Earthquakes are going to have to hire, or obviously bring in players who are going to be committed to the plan. I think the biggest problem, with this wooden spoon Quakes side is the fact that you have a lot of players who were just not committed to the process. They weren't committed to the project. Jesse Farinelli was trying to initiate, right? And I guess from the outside looking in, you kind of do accept, the players, negative feelings towards.
Oh, I think we just lost Joel. Are you there, Joel? Are you there, Joel? Once?
Twice.
Twice?
3 times.
Sold. We're going to try to get Joel back on the line. But it is interesting that a manager decision changes the perception of a team. And like we talked yesterday with Jeff Carlisle as well, Duane, it is, in a way, the first move, but it cannot be the last move. There has to be other moves that does change the perception as well. So hopefully that would work.
Yeah, no, you said a manager hiring can change the perception of ambition, but you need to follow through with actual success afterwards, because people will only come to watch a manager to a certain point. I recall, Kevin, as you probably do as well, a time when the most legendary hockey player of all time played for coached the, I think they were called the Phoenix Coyotes at the time. They're now the Arizona Coyotes. And it didn't really drive the needle that much in terms of attendance, right? Because as much as Wayne Gretzky was behind the bench, Wayne Gretzky was not behind the net passing the puck out to people who score from the slot, right? Yeah. So you need to have that follow through as well. This is a good move for them in theory, but we still very much need to see the practice of it, because, for guys like Joel that are close to it and they care about it, I understand how they're excited about this, and I encourage them to be so. But from an outside perspective, it's difficult to not look at this and go, that's nice, but show me when you're winning games.
And last question for Joel. We got Joel back. Joel, I'm wondering, on the pitch, I'm going to give you 2 names that are maybe at the opposite end of the spectrum, but both are important for the Quakes, especially one going forward and one in the history of the team. Chris Wondolowski and Tommy Thompson. Tommy Thompson has been touted a few years ago as one of the most exciting prospects in Major League Soccer, and there has been a bit of a trouble lately in the last few years, especially with injuries, but been battling for playing time. And Chris Wondolowski, the biggest name, maybe outside of Landon Donovan, to have played for the Quakes. How do you move on, if you need to, from Wondolowski, and how do you include Thompson more on the pitch?
Well, to be honest with you, I don't think you move on from Wondolowski and reintroduce Tommy Thompson as a solution, as hard as it is to say. If one goes, I don't see the other one staying around. Not that they have like a dependency between each other, but I think that the team is ready to move on, obviously, from that era. It's pretty blatant now, right? I mean, it's pretty blatantly obvious that this team has tried to move on from that, for the last 2 years, obviously, since Farinelli's arrival. But I think they still have time. Tommy Thompson re-signed, I believe it was last year. Chris Wondolowski has 2019 to play. He has a contract for the 2019 season, and then after that, I believe there's a big question mark after that, right? Probably not going to return, to be honest. This might be it. But what a run he's had. Obviously a legend to the sport domestically, a legend in the league. I'm sure he's going to get his record, maybe in the next 2 weeks. And he's forever, he's immortal, to the black and blue fan base. Tommy Thompson is a really, really interesting case. You have here, like you said, a youngster who is highly touted, regarded as, the future of the Quakes. That obviously didn't age well. And he's now, turning 24 next year. By that time, a player should have already had a couple of good seasons under him. Would have been a bit more relevant, I guess you would say. As hard it is to say, it hasn't been good for him. It hasn't been good for him. So yeah, I just don't see how you move forward or you move on, from Chris Wondolowski, and then see Tommy Thompson make a reemergence as his successor. I don't know. I don't see that, and it's the Monday was truly the start of a new era. It was the start of a new era, and I know we still have yet to see what Matias Almeida is going to bring on the pitch, but his resume speaks highly. He's brought teams from the gutter up time and time again. I don't think it's a coincidence.
Joel Soria, Editor-in-Chief of the Quakes Epicenter, thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you, guys. I really appreciate it.
And it'll be the end of the show for today. Duane and I are taking a little break, going to record the Two Solitudes Soccer Podcast, Canadian Soccer and Canadian Soccer Only, which you can subscribe to on Patreon, patreon.com/sports podcasting network. $2 a month will give you access to the show. Duane and I will be talking about the Canadian Premier League's kit and the colors of the new team. Canadian Women's National Team qualifying for the World Cup. They're playing against Costa Rica today. And the Canadian Men's National Team getting ready for their game against Dominica. And until next time, as always, have a great soccer.
You can find the podcast version of all the shows we do on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Google Play Store, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and anywhere you get your podcast.